Good morning, Vietnam!
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are tonight's entertainment.
The name's Bond. James Bond.
But don't ever take sides with anyone against the family.
Here's Johnny!
Whoa, this is heavy. I'm not even supposed to be here today.
Working on my day off.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another episode of the Showtime with Roman podcast, the not-so-feature-length podcast where I, your host, Roman RBC, discusses movie news, trailers, reviews some movies, and talks about a discussion topic of the week at the end of every show. Pretty solid show today, pretty solid slate, 2 news topics, 2 films I'm going to be talking about, and one of those films I'll be integrating into this week's discussion topic. So first things first, let's get right into it. Director Rian Johnson of The Last Jedi, Looper, and Brick is directing a film titled Knives Out, starring Daniel Craig, which is a contemporary murder mystery, also written by Johnson over the summer, and is up for bidding at TIFF, Toronto International Film Festival, this weekend. So that's a lot of info real quick. So it's a contemporary murder mystery, which is great. Brick is apparently a noir thriller. I haven't seen the film, but a lot of people say it's his masterpiece, or his best film so far, anyways, at the least. And this is really interesting. I love The Last Jedi. I really liked Looper, and I really can't wait to see it because he is just getting off a big franchise film that obviously not a lot of people loved, unfortunately. But he is now directing a smaller contemporary murder mystery in the vein of an Agatha Christie novel, which is apparently where he got his inspiration from. So I'm really excited about this, specifically for Daniel Craig as well, because the producer, Ram Bergman, who is one of Rian Johnson's lifelong friends, he was a producer on The Last Jedi as well. He had a couple things to say about Daniel Craig that were really interesting to me, and something that, well, I completely agree with. So Rian Johnson said, speaking with Deadline, Johnson spoke about how he and his producing partner, Ram Bergman, hatched the idea of casting Craig. I'm getting this off of Collider.com. He says, I've been a huge fan and always wanted to work with him, and as I worked on the script, trying to get it right, Ram and I were wringing our hands over who could be the detective. Then, serendipitously, we heard Daniel might have a small window, and it worked out. He's an actor of extraordinary range, and we are looking forward to the fun of finding that modern detective and collaborating with Daniel on creating a new Poirot. So, very interesting. I'm super excited because for anybody that's seen The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, Daniel Craig plays a similar role, except he plays more of a journalist type instead of, a detective, specifically. So this is really exciting. Daniel Craig is a really talented dude. He obviously is known for turning in 2 of probably the best Bond performances, on a general consensus level anyways. And this is really exciting. This is great news. It is apparently going to be released by the end of next year, so I can't wait to see more from Rian Johnson. He's a fantastic director with a really interesting cinematic language, and he's a young director, so I really can't wait to see what goes down. And Daniel Craig being cast in this as a lead man, I can't wait. So hopefully all goes well for that project. I'm very excited. So next up, we've got some not so exciting news. We've got Die Hard Year One, which is the 6th Die Hard film in the franchise, is now going to be titled McClane. And it is a story that is a split narrative where older John McClane investigates a case from his past, and another actor would be playing a young McClane in flashbacks or whatever. Here's the thing. Die Hard is a franchise that I've only seen 2 films out of. I've seen the first one and the 5th one. I saw the 5th one before I ever saw the first one. And the 5th one, even though I wasn't a big fan of the franchise because I hadn't seen any of the other ones, wasn't very good. I didn't like it. And then I saw the first one, and it's a masterpiece. It's one of the best films probably ever made, and it's probably the best action film ever made, debatably, arguably, right? So now they're coming out with another one, and although I don't necessarily hate the idea, I just think it's an idea that doesn't really need to happen. Now, this sounds a little bit more inspiring than just, young, old John McClane, getting back into it, being, 60 years old or whatever. And that's a little inspiring. But I don't really believe in the project, and I think it's because there's just no interest for me. I'm going to check out the other Die Hard films for sure, but at the same time, Bruce Willis, this guy, he's just not into it. And they keep bringing him back because he wants money, and he knows that it's a part of, a franchise that has one of the greatest films of all time in it. And he's just, it is what it is, and I'm not really excited for it. There could be someone out there that is excited for it, but I remember listening to the breaking news when they had announced that a sixth Die Hard film was coming, and sort of like the premise of the story was leaking, and they changed it significantly from what it used to be. I don't remember exactly what it was, but people were saying, why don't they just create a sixth Die Hard film where it's been however many years, like a 50th anniversary or 40th anniversary since the events of John McClane saving Nakatomi Plaza, despite the fact that a lot of it did get beat up pretty bad, of saving Nakatomi Plaza from complete destruction and being, robbed hundreds and billions and millions of dollars. And all of a sudden, they're celebrating this big event, and once again, it gets taken over during that big event by, somebody else. On one hand, I kind of like that idea because that sounds super cool, but at the same time, it's kind of a little nostalgic and a little cheap because it's playing on the fact that, we're back in Nakatomi again. It'd kind of be like the Force Awakens of the Die Hard franchise, if that makes any sense. So I'm not very excited. It's titled McClane. Just probably going to be about as good as Jason Bourne was, which was fine. So that's that for that topic. So let me know if you're excited for Die Hard Year One, now titled McClane. Next up, so two films that I watched this week. I watched a myriad of other films. Specifically, I watched Damien Chazelle's Guy and Madeline on a Park Bench, his thesis film in college. It was all right. Then I watched a couple short films. I watched some other films, point blank. Okay. But specifically, I want to focus on Christopher Robin, 2018 release, and 1959's North by Northwest, directed by the great Alfred Hitchcock. So starting with Christopher Robin, it's a film that I just didn't see when it came out a month ago, and it's a movie that I didn't really have interest in seeing. I was a fan of Winnie the Pooh growing up. I knew the music, I knew all the cues, I knew all the little nostalgic beats that the movie was going to hit on. And here's the thing. It is perfectly decent. In the regard that it is Disney's Christopher Robin. Obviously, anyone that knows me knows that I'm not particularly a big fan of contemporary Disney right now. All film is technically contemporary film in certain contexts, but what they're doing right now is I just don't really enjoy it, and I think it's a really flawed template, and it's a very lazy template. So Christopher Robin does feel lazy in every way that I dislike what Disney is doing. So I ended up giving the film a 2.5, and here's why. The movie has great performances from Ewan McGregor, and Jim Cummings is a godsend. His performance as Winnie the Pooh and a couple other characters is brilliant. It is unbelievable. Some of the best laughs of the year come from Winnie the Pooh. There's a sequence where he knocks down a shelf and he calls it a ladder, and it made me laugh because it's so honest, sincere, and it just kind of did make me feel like a kid again, But it was beautiful. It was a great performance, and the first act of the movie I was kind of interested in, then it kind of lost me, then it kind of got back on track. And then the second act just ultimately kind of defines what the movie is, and it just kind of meanders. It is a story eventually about, making more time for your family, making more time to have fun, and, don't lose that childlike wonder that you had because, once you get back to it, you can learn something about yourself and about the people that are surrounding you. And you can inspire change, you can inspire people through that, and that's great. But here's the problem. The second the movie got into the second act, I knew exactly how it was going to play out. And I knew why, because of who was producing the film. And I said, here's what's going to happen, here's how they're going to say it, who's going to say it, and we're going to have our movie. And it ends exactly like you would expect. Now, what can you expect from a kid's movie? That's what people are going to say. I get that. But when I see a film, kids' films, like Kubo, Incredibles, Inside Out, stuff like that, you see these characters go through natural arcs and progressions, and they exemplify the themes of the film. Now, Christopher Robin has some of that in some regards, but they don't really do anything with it. My friend Mikey, I mention him all the time because he's just an incredible film fan, for one, and he's very intelligent. He just says that the movie talks about relaxing and not spending so much time doing something else, but it doesn't really focus on anything. It doesn't take that time to relax because it tries to. It's just a weird movie. It's just a weird ass movie. And that's why I gave it a 2.5. Like I said, I didn't hate myself while watching it. I didn't hate the fact that, I was sitting there watching these eerie-looking animals come back to life or whatever. That's not the point. The point is that it's just a very strange film that I feel like could have been significantly better than it was. And it's a shame because I think that obviously Disney, being the studio that they are and having the long history that they do, it just didn't quite gel together, and it just was kind of boring in some parts. So just to specifically quote Mikey, he says, "It's quite generic and forces in stakes when it really has no need for them. For a film about relaxing, it doesn't seem to have the time for it," which perfectly sums up the film. So that's that for Christopher Robin. 2.5 out of 5, right towards the middle of my list of the year, right around like Tomb Raider, where I didn't really hate myself while watching it, and it didn't really do anything for me though in the end. So next up, 1959's classic masterpiece ? North by Northwest. It's everything everyone said it was, and it's great. It's an incredible film. I gave it a 4.5 out of 5. It is a movie that is basically the best type of Bond film that we've probably ever gotten. It's full of double-crossing, romance, charm, great lead performances, great story with a really inspired conclusion. The crop duster sequence is just beautifully told through the camera work and music and just Cary Grant's epic performance. His performance is just epic. He shows a range of emotions. And although I wish the movie tied up a little bit neater, it is a movie that, it just when you watch a classic film, and you have all this hype going into it because people have talked about it being one of the best films ever made and one of Alfred Hitchcock's best works, and it certainly is. He hasn't made a bad film. I don't know. The Man Who Knew Too Much wasn't very good. The 1934 version, I didn't really like that one. But North by Northwest, you can see the inspiration for decades of film to follow, and you can see the inspiration for so many Bond films and spy films. So then it makes me think that when we're watching films today and someone say, "Oh, this is a really great spy thriller," even though it has nothing really to do with a spy thriller, I see North by Northwest now and I say, that's a spy thriller. It has all the elements of it, and it doesn't have the crazy cool gadgets or cool cars or most insane stunts. And that's what's so great about it. Is it's very personal, and it's a little bit long, 2 hours and 15 minutes, and I think that's my biggest issue with it, is that I feel like the pacing could have been tightened up a little bit better. They could have screwed down some of those screws a little bit better, those nuts and bolts, to really make it a more focused and neat moving picture. But it didn't quite come together for me in that department. But overall, it's just an incredible film. I laughed, and I felt moments of intensity. I felt moments of being frightened for characters, and there's lots of crazy twists in the film. And it's just a great film, and I would highly recommend anyone to check it out. It's on Filmstruck right now if you're subscribed for $11 a month. It's the best streaming service out there right now for anyone that wants to look at a wide array of different films and want to expand their horizons at the click of a button, literally. So North by Northwest, it's great. I wouldn't call it a masterpiece. I wouldn't call it Hitchcock's best work. It might be somewhere in either 3 or 4. It's in my top 6 because I've only seen 6, but that leads right into the discussion topic. So I'm a critic. I'm a wannabe critic because that's what I want to be. And I use an app website called letterboxcom. It's a great tool. It keeps me focused on things that I want to watch with my watch list, and it's also shown me what other people love, and I can see other people develop their taste over time through their diary of film, and it's shown me as a writer how much I've grown as a writer, and it's a great tool to use. Now, there's a Letterboxd community on Facebook. It's a great community, a couple toxic people, whatever. There's not that many, but there's a couple. And a lot of the times people will post reviews of, here's my 3.5-star review of Avengers Infinity War. Someone will post, here's my 2.5-star review of First Reformed. Here's my 1.5-star review of Jurassic World. Here's my review of a classic film I didn't really like. 3 stars for Rebel Without a Cause. Which, fair enough. Makes the most sense because it's a decent movie. So here's the thing. Discussion topic. Are ratings and rankings a true indicator of quality on your personal level? Are they as arbitrary as we say they are? How does your personal scale look, and what requirements does a film have to meet to reach a certain level? So, multiple questions here, and I'm going to go over all of it within the next 15 to 20 minutes. So, ratings and rankings. It's something that I have struggled with for a long time, and I finally settled on doing it on a 100 scale. Because I feel like a 100 scale, or like a 90 out of 100, 80 out of 100, it allows me the opportunity to realize that 100 out of 100, obviously, I would give that a perfect score. But a 96 out of 100, not entirely a perfect score, but a 96 out of 100, or 96 to 100 out of 100, would mean that I would give it a 5-star rating. Which means that it's a movie that does everything I wanted it to accomplish, everything that it wanted to accomplish. It met my expectations in some regards. And it's a movie that is just fantastic. There's almost no flaws within it. Now, obviously, every movie isn't flawless, but if a movie for me gets a 96 out of 100, I look at that and I say, that's one of the best films I'll probably see all year. And it's just a fantastic film with probably no flaws. I mean, maybe there's a couple things it could have done better. You know, maybe it wasn't as good as it could have been, but at the least, it did it at a great level. And that's what matters. So if a movie sets out to accomplish what it wants to and does it at a great level in every category that I see or hear, then you've got a 96 out of 100. For example, a 2.5 out of 5, like with Christopher Robin. I gave it a 2.5 out of 5 because it's a movie I didn't hate myself while watching it, but its themes and ideas weren't really explored and they didn't execute them properly, and it kind of meanders and the direction in writing is kind of all over the place, but it has decent things that it wants to accomplish, but it doesn't go about accomplishing them in the right way. For example, another film, Captain America Civil War, is one that I loved upon first viewing, but the more I see it and the more I talk about it, the more I realize that it's a 2.5 out of 5, which is what I have it at right now, because it's a movie with good themes and ideas and concepts and good moments that show me that this movie could be something more than what it is, but it doesn't quite do it and execute it properly, in my opinion. That's essentially a 2.5 out of 5. But a lot of people, and this all stems from Marvel Cinematic Universe discussion, and I don't want to get too comic booky about it, but here's the thing, and I see this with a lot of other people, and not just specifically me. I don't understand why people are so obsessed with the ratings and rankings that someone gives a film. For example, North by Northwest is a 4.5 out of 5. It is my 4th favorite Stanley Kubrick film. That doesn't mean I disliked it because it's near the bottom with 5 and 6. Vertigo, a movie that people say is one of the best films ever made, I gave it a 4 out of 5, and that's the 5th on my list. But 6th is The Man Who Knew Too Much, 1934 version, which I gave a 2.5 out of 5. Right? That doesn't mean Vertigo and Man Who Knew Too Much are on the same level, in my opinion. One is substantially better than the other, and a ranking doesn't do it justice if you aren't going to read what I actually had to say about the film, or you didn't ask what I had to say about the film. And I think rankings can be a good tool. And the reason why I think it can be a good tool is it can give you a general idea and give someone else the general idea of what you cherish over something else, in your personal opinion. And sometimes I think people take lists and rankings too personally. I mainly do it as a joke, but when someone posts a 4.5-star review of The Dark Knight, I say too low should be a half-star higher. Obviously as a joke, but that's just my personal opinion. I'd give it a 5 out of 5. But rankings and ratings can be a good tool, I think, to give someone the general idea of how you feel about a film or a film franchise or an actor. I have a ranking of Tom Cruise movies on Letterboxd. A Few Good Men is number 1, and The Mummy is dead last. But in between that, it's kind of interchangeable. Because, despite the fact that, it's all subjective, someone's comment I'll be reading later, CJ, he says rankings and ratings implement a form of objectivity to something that is purely subjective. And he's 100% correct. That is the best definition of why ratings and rankings are a problem. And it's something that I use not for myself. Sometimes I do, because when I want to look back on a year, I want to realize, what did I cherish over something else, and why did I cherish it over that one thing? And it gives me an opportunity to go back and learn and develop my taste, and to realize, here's how far I've come as a film fan. In 2016, I didn't like this film at this time, but when I watched it 5 years later, I liked it more, so I moved it up. But at the same time, I still think people think ratings and rankings are an issue. Like, too much of an issue, as if they can't happen at all. No ratings, no rankings, just talk about the film. And for a while, when I was writing on Roman's movie reviews, which I still do regularly, I haven't in a while because I can't really see much of anything because I don't really have any money. But anyways, I digress. So when I was writing back when Power Rangers came out last year, for a couple weeks, I ended every review with no score. Because I was really pissed off because a group of people, a couple weeks before, they got really mad that I gave a movie a 70 out of 100. And they were like, oh my God, you didn't like this movie, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I liked it. It's a movie that I enjoyed. It's a movie that I had issues with, but on a general level, a 70 out of 100 is a good score. That means that I liked the film. It's why I don't understand why people take ratings to a level of like, oh, your rating doesn't match up to what you say. Well, then just listen to what I have to say. You people ask for ratings, and then they get mad when I rate something a certain way based off of what I said. And I think this is what happens for a lot of other people. I read a couple critics that don't score their films, and their reviews are better than anyone else's. And for me personally, I'm somebody that doesn't score my film until after I review it and reread it back, edit everything, and then I score it to be like, that's how I felt about the film. Because for a while I was, like getting out of a movie, I'd be like, yeah, that was my 5th favorite of the year. Yeah, that was my 5th least favorite of the year. Yeah, that was a 70 out of 100. Yeah, it was a 50 out of 100. But now people ask me, what's your score? I'm like, why does my score matter? Don't you want to know what I thought about the movie? But then some people, smartly say, well, if you tell me your score, I can get a brief idea of kind of how you felt, so I have an expectation of what you're about to say. And I know a couple writers that put their scores at the beginning of a review. And now I can go read a couple paragraphs that ultimately sum up that score, which is genius. It's great. It's a great, great tool. But ratings and rankings are now being taken to a level where people want to, chastise you. Oh my God, I can't believe you gave Avengers Infinity War 3.5 out of 5. How could you give it a 3.5 out of 5 if you have this issue with the film? Well, look at it in context. Look at it compared to the things I say positively about the film. A 3.5 out of 5 for me is a film that I really enjoyed watching, with brilliant moments that aren't very good, but overall, it's a movie that met my expectations. And for Infinity War specifically, it was as good as I anticipated it to be, and as good as good as it could have been, in my opinion. So in a 3.5 out of 5, if you read my review for Infinity War and Roman's movie reviews, a 3.5 out of 5 perfectly sums up how I feel about Infinity War if you read my review. Because I praise cinematography, I praise visual effects, I love the shit out of Thanos. I like a lot of the action. I don't like some of the action. It has really good humor, and it blends it seamlessly with the drama. But overall, it has some issues regarding editing, writing, directing. But when you're talking about a film that big, it's not going to accomplish certain things at a level that I would have wanted him to achieve because, well, it's just a very difficult film to do. But at the same time, you have to do your job better. That's why I gave it a 3.5 out of 5. Does that make sense for anyone that's listening? Because for me, people want to go out here and they say, oh, what did you think about Wonder Woman? Yeah, I gave it a 4 out of 5. Oh, I don't trust you. I don't trust you. Where's it at on your rankings list? Why do you have it next to Logan? Why does it matter? Why does it matter where it is with Logan? I mean, shouldn't that tell you that I think that Logan and Wonder Woman are the same exact in quality? Or similar? Because all films are case-by-case basis. Just because I love something in one film doesn't mean I'm going to love it in the other. It just depends on the context of the film, the context of the story, and context of the direction, and the universe, and the implications, whatever. I'm kind of going into full rant mode, but that's what's so frustrating about this, is because just listen to what people have to say. And I'm going to read a couple comments here. I'm going to expand on them a little bit more. So, Brendan, I think overall the reasoning behind why you like or dislike a film is more important than the score. I do find it weird, though, when someone's score doesn't really line up with what they are saying about a film. I didn't really ask him to expand because I didn't have the time, and I wish I did, but he's generally correct. For me, I rewatched Looper. I wasn't too big on it before. I rewatched it, gave it about a 3.5 out of 5. But people are like, oh, your review doesn't really sound like it lines up with that. I don't know what... Does that matter? Does that matter? Does it really matter? Because it's just... I'm saying what I'm saying, and that's what matters. The score doesn't, because it's arbitrary. When someone says, I saw they just released the reviews, IGN just released the review for Spider-Man for PS4 this weekend, and they gave it an 8.7 out of 10, which is a superb score. Right? That means they loved it, and it's a great game. Maybe some issues here and there. But people were like, why does it get an 8.7? Why don't you just give it the 0.3? Why can't you give it a 9? Because it's arbitrary. There isn't a clear-cut definition, and everyone's going to have probably different definitions, but why do people care so much by the 0.3? I remember sometimes people were like, why does it get a 71? Why don't you just give it a 70? Where's the 0.1 come from? Who cares? Who cares? You ask me for ratings when I write reviews that I don't put ratings on. I give you the rating, and it's still not enough. Anyways, moving on to the next one. Michael K. Love Michael. He always gives great answers. Speaking from experience, ratings only mean what you want them to mean. And because they're so personal, it's why they're arbitrary in the grand scheme of things. It's more important to back up your rating with words than the rating itself. Michael K., he is somebody that gets so much shit for giving so many 5s out of 5s. I'm guilty of it. I do it playfully. For a while maybe I didn't. But he gives lots of 5s out of 5s. But it doesn't matter. Michael loved the film, and his words back it up. I read all of Michael's reviews. They're not very long, they're well written, and it perfectly sums up why he appreciated the film. That's all that matters. Dan Purcell, long comment, but I had to read it because this is perfection, Dan. Perfection. If you're listening right now, I told you this in the comments on Facebook, but this is perfection. For me, ratings and rankings were and still are a great way to learn and develop your taste, because it's a form of curation and a means of training your mind and heart to find the cultural works that appeal to you as an individual. Additionally, I love how rankings can appeal to the analytical, logical, and mathematical mind, so much so that I can understand their necessity. However, in the era of information overload, we've become too reliant on immediate numerical information to deliver us a complete emotional opinion of a work of art. And while that works for some analytical minds who can use numbers and logic to express emotions, there are so many different kinds of people for whom that numerical information does not work. So ultimately, I don't like when critics or filmmakers have top 10 lists, but I can understand why they might. Additionally, I find it interesting that critics have more top 10 lists while filmmakers will have something more along the lines of, these are the first 10 films that come to mind based on my taste lining up with the subject matter we're talking about. Dan Purcell, say it louder for the people in the back. I'm going to go back real quick to this right here. For me, ratings and rankings were and still are a great way to learn and develop your taste because it's a form of curation and a means of training your mind and heart to find the cultural works that appeal to you as an individual. That is perfect. And I mentioned it earlier because I like to use rankings and ratings to go back and realize, here's how I've developed. The last 3 years, my favorite film of the year has been science fiction. And right now, Annihilation is number 2. What does that tell you? Because before that, it wasn't science fiction. It was a drama. 2 dramas were in my top 2. Whiplash and Nightcrawler. And then Birdman. And then I think it was Interstellar and War for the Planet of the Apes. Or Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. Science fiction, yeah, Interstellar and Dawn. But look how my tastes have developed for science fiction. And my appreciation for science fiction has grown in just 4 years. So for someone like me, I don't rely on numerical information immediately, like Dan mentions. For some people, they do. But for me, it allows me to recognize and realize just how much my tastes have developed over the years. When I look at my top 20 or even my top 50 favorite films of all time, I do put numbers by them, but do I love The Dark Knight as much as I love Children of Men at number 12? Hell yeah, I do, and for different reasons. Do I love Inception as much as I love Return of the King? Just about. Maybe I like one a little bit more, and that's probably why I put it higher. Do I love Finding Nemo as much as I love Donnie Darko? Yes. But because they're different films with different contexts, and I like them for different reasons. Dan, you nailed it. I'd love to end on that note, but Sander also gave a great comment. My personal rating system is mostly based off on my enjoyment of a film. While it would be a lot different if I actually did any work as a critic, because I don't think the score matters at all for critics, and the only thing that matters is the quality of information they convey in their reviews or analysis. Same really with rankings. It's just a fun thing I do. But a critic would have to actually make a point out of why Persona is above The Virgin Spring on the list of best Bergman films. Well said. Once again, everyone here nailed it. And there's a couple more comments on my personal Facebook page I wanted to include, but for the sake of making the show as short as it is, I had to kind of cut down on them. But Pedro gave a great response. Ryan gave another great response this week. I wanted to read it, but it was just a little bit too long. I didn't want to have 2 very long ones in here. And I ended up picking Dan's because I already told him I would 100% read his comment on the show, and I did. So that's the thing, guys. Just don't talk about what they said. Don't dwindle it down to this number, this measurable, finite thing. It's more than that. A 3.5 for me, a 4 out of 5, a 4.5, or a 5 out of 5, or a 2, or a 2.5, or a 1, and a 1.5, and a half star, and a star. I don't know why I said it in that order, but I did. Anyways, those numbers out of 5, they are the premise for what's being said. When you read the premise of a story, young girl falls in love with young guy, eventually get married, have kids, live life together, and die. That is the premise of a story. The score of a review is the premise of the review. And if you read the review and you listen to what someone has to say, that's what matters. You can buy into the premise, be interested in the premise, and then you can listen further to what that person has to say, because that's what matters. That's the meat of the story. That's the meat of the review. And that's all I have to say about that. So that'll do it for this week's episode of the Showtime with Roman podcast. Once again, God, I just wish I could podcast every day. It's very difficult with timing, living in a big house, family, whatever. But thank you again for listening. Tell me what you think about reviews and ratings. What are your thoughts? But yeah, have another great movie watching week. Keep on watching film. I'm going to maybe see Searching on Thursday. Haven't fully committed to that yet. But Spider-Man's coming out on Friday for PlayStation, so I'm going to be a little busy with that. And hopefully I'll get back into the swing of things when Predator comes out, because I haven't written a full review in a while. It's actually been since before 2001: A Space Odyssey. I don't remember what came out before that weekend. So, oh well. I'll get back into writing in a little bit. Once again, working on some projects this week. I had to find a little bit of inspiration. I've had a really rough week mentally. I felt very defeated. I'm getting lots of headaches, which is frustrating. But yeah, I'm going to be getting back into that. North by Northwest and watching Guy and Madeline on a park bench along with a couple other classic films really inspired me. So I'll be getting back into those and getting close to finishing a couple of the things I've been working on. So once again, thanks for listening. A little long-winded towards the conclusion here, but have a wonderful movie watching week and keep tuning into the Showtime with Roman podcast. Also, make sure you check out my girlfriend's podcast, What Do I Know with Joe, on SoundCloud. And also make sure to subscribe to the Talon Brothers podcast on iTunes. A great podcast with a couple of my buddies that sit down for about an hour and talk about movies just as much as I do. Thanks you for listening. Have a wonderful week.